Did you hear about this? Politico might actually be going bankrupt. I got to admit, a part of me is kind of like doing a little happy dance over here.
Yeah, well, what's kind of fascinating about this is that Politico's, potential downfall could actually shed some light on the often hidden world of news funding.
Right.
And why that matters so much to, well, all of us, really.
For sure. Let's dive in.
Okay.
So Politico missed payroll, which obviously sparked all these rumors of financial trouble.
Right.
And at first I was just like, okay, whatever, another big news organization biting the dust. But then I came across this article from Vox Populi.
Uh-huh.
And things got really interesting.
Yeah.
It claims that Politico was getting a bunch of its funding from, get this, USAID.
Okay.
And losing that money might be a big reason why they're struggling now.
Interesting.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, USAID, I guess, is a government agency, right?
Right, yeah.
And they provide international development assistance.
Yeah.
But, and this is where things get a little shady, some people argue that it's sometimes used as like a way for the government to exert influence, which kind of makes sense, right? If you're giving money to someone, you probably want something in return.
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way. If you're a news organization and you're relying on a particular source for funding, are you really going to publish anything that might upset that source?
Probably not.
Exactly.
So this whole thing with Politico, it's making me wonder, did they maybe lose favor with USAID somehow?
It's possible. I mean, we don't have all the facts yet, but it definitely raises some questions.
For sure. And here's the kicker. Politico isn't the only one. This Vox Populi article claims that even like the BBC and the New York Times have received funding from USAID.
Wow, seriously.
Yeah. It blew my mind. I mean, how can these organizations claim to be impartial when they're taking millions of dollars from government entities?
It does make you wonder, right, about the potential for bias. It's like, how can we really know what's true anymore when the news we're getting is potentially being influenced by those in power?
Totally. It feels like we're getting further and further away from real independent journalism.
It's funny. In a way, this whole Politico situation, while obviously not great for the people who work there, might actually be a good thing for journalism in the long run.
How so?
Well, I think it exposes the sort of vulnerabilities of these big, heavily funded news organizations. It reminds us to be critical of the information we're consuming, to look beyond the big names and the flashy headlines.
Right, to consider the source.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and to seek out alternative sources of information.
You mean like smaller independent outlets, ones that aren't beholden to big sponsors or government agencies?
Exactly. Think about some of those incredible investigative pieces you've read, or the local news sites that are really holding power accountable. There's usually smaller teams or even solo journalists doing that work, right?
Yeah, you're right. I never thought about it like that.
And they can do that because they're not worried about upsetting some big sponsor or towing a particular line. They're free to actually pursue the truth.
That's pretty powerful.
It is, and I think it's something to celebrate. This whole situation with Politico, it's kind of making me want to root for the underdog, for those journalists who are out there grinding, doing the hard work without compromising their integrity.
Yeah, totally. It's refreshing, isn't it?
And it makes you wonder, what would the news landscape look like if we had more of these independent voices?
Right. If we weren't so reliant on these big, potentially compromised organizations.
It's definitely something to think about. And maybe, just maybe, this whole Politico debacle will be a wake-up call for people to start seeking out and supporting those truly independent voices.
I hope so.
Me too. The more we diversify our sources of information, the less power these big, potentially compromised outlets have over the narratives that shape our world.
Well said. I think we need to dig deeper into this idea of supporting independent journalism.
Right?
Like, how can we actually make a difference?
Yeah, what are some concrete steps we can take to help these independent voices thrive?
Exactly. But first, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back to explore how we can all play a role in fostering a more diverse and independent news landscape.
Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about those independent outlets.
Yeah, the ones that aren't beholden to big sponsors.
Right, exactly. They're like a breath of fresh air, It's good to know that there are still journalists out there who are driven by truth.
For sure. It's inspiring.
Yeah, and it brings us to an important question, right? What can we do to help? Like, what can we do to support these independent voices?
Yeah, what can we do to help them actually thrive? I'm all ears. What are some concrete steps? What can we actually do?
Okay, well, for starters, I think we need to be a lot more conscious of where we're getting our news from, right?
So Like, not just relying on those big established names.
Right. Instead of just, going to the same old sources, let's try to make an effort to seek out those smaller outlets.
So, like, diversify our news diets.
Exactly. And I'm not just talking about reading a wider range of articles.
Okay.
It's about, actively supporting these independent journalists.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, one way is to subscribe to their publications or, donate to their crowdfunding campaigns.
So put our money where our mouths are.
Exactly. It shows them that we actually value their work.
Right.
And it, helps them to stay afloat, to keep doing what you're doing.
Makes sense. What else?
Sharing their work on social media is another great way to support them.
Right. Get the word out.
Exactly. It helps them reach a wider audience.
Okay.
And, it helps to break the dominance of those big media giants.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a mini rebellion against the mainstream media. Ha! I like it. I'm in.
Excellent. And remember, supporting these folks, it's not just about money or social media shares. It's also about engaging with their work, leaving thoughtful comments, participating in discussions. All that stuff helps to create a sense of community around these outlets.
So it's about building relationships, not just being passive consumers of news.
Exactly. And as we become more engaged with independent journalism, I think we start to see the world a little differently.
So?
Well, we're exposed to different perspectives, right?
Okay.
Different narratives, different ways of understanding complex issues.
Like we're breaking free from the echo chamber.
Exactly. We're opening ourselves up to a whole new world of information and insight.
I like that.
Yeah.
This whole conversation has really highlighted the importance of transparency. If we're going to trust the news, we need to know where it's coming from.
Absolutely.
Who's funding it, what their motivations are.
100%. Transparency is key. And it's something that independent outlets, they often do better than their larger counterparts.
Because they have less to hide.
In a way, yeah. They're not beholden to a board of directors or anything. Their primary responsibility is to their readers, not shareholders.
It's like that that analogy of the mom and pop shop versus the giant corporation, right?
Yeah.
You tend to trust the mom and pop shop more because you know the people behind it,
That's a great analogy.
You know their values.
Yeah, it speaks to the power of human connection.
Right.
When we know the people behind the news, we're more likely to trust them.
Exactly. It's about building trust and community.
And that's something the mainstream media has kind of lost sight of,
So.
They've become so big, so impersonal, so focused on profits and clicks.
Right, they've forgotten about the people.
Yeah, they've forgotten the human element of it all.
So independent journalism is like the antidote.
Yeah, in a way, it fills the void, providing that kind of personalized, community-driven news experience that people are craving.
And hopefully, as more and more people start to realize the value of independent journalism, we'll see a shift in the media landscape, right?
I hope so.
A shift away from those big corporate-controlled outlets and towards smaller, more independent voices.
Yeah, it's a future I'd like to see.
Me too. But let's be realistic. There are still challenges that independent journalists face. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's tough to compete with the resources and reach of those big news organizations.
Yeah, for sure. It's not an easy road for these folks.
So how do they do it? How do they keep going?
Well, I think it comes down to passion, They're not in it for the money or the fame.
Right.
They're in it because they believe in the power of storytelling and the importance of truth and accountability.
That's inspiring.
It is. And it's something we should all support.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think the big takeaway is that we all have a role to play in supporting independent journalism.
For sure.
Whether it's subscribing, donating, sharing their work, engaging in discussions.
Every little bit helps.
Exactly. So let's all do our part to make a difference. Welcome back to the deep dive. It's crazy how much this Politico thing has made us think about, news funding.
Yeah, for sure.
Like we've been talking about those smaller, independent outlets.
Right, the ones who are leading the charge for, honest reporting.
Exactly. It's kind of like a David and Goliath situation, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
These smaller outlets, they're, taking on the giants.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, they're winning.
You really are.
But let's be real. Even those super dedicated journalists, they still got to, pay the bills.
Right.
So how do these smaller organizations actually fund their work without, compromising their independence?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How do they actually stay afloat?
Well, the good news is there are some alternative funding models out there
Okay, I'm listening.
that allow them to kind of stay true to their mission.
Like what?
Well, one popular model is reader-supported journalism,
Okay.
which is basically where the audience directly contributes to the publication's costs.
Through, like, subscriptions and stuff,
Exactly. Through subscriptions, donations, that kind of thing.
so they can bypass those big advertisers.
Right, and corporate sponsors.
So it's like a direct line of support
Right.
from the people who actually value the work.
Yeah, exactly. And it creates like a sense of shared ownership.
Hmm.
Our readers are invested in the publication's success.
That makes sense. Any other models out there?
Another interesting approach is foundation grants.
Okay.
So philanthropic organizations will give money to like specific projects.
So they can do those really in-depth investigations.
Exactly. The kind of stuff that might not be commercially viable, you know.
That's awesome.
And some outlets are even doing those hybrid models, combining reader support with grants, maybe even a little ad revenue,
Okay.
but with like really strict ethical guidelines, of course.
Right. Okay, keep that independence.
Exactly.
So it seems like independent journalism is like evolving.
Yeah,
It's finding new ways to stay afloat.
it really is. And I think it's being driven by this like growing awareness that the old model is broken.
Yeah, the corporate-controlled media.
Yeah, exactly. People want news they can trust.
News that's not just driven by profit.
Right.
This has been really eye-opening.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the whole news landscape differently now.
That's great to hear.
It's not just about the big names anymore.
It's about finding those hidden gems. Right?
Exactly. Those independent voices.
The ones who are really committed to the truth.
Yeah, we can support them
Yeah.
by, subscribing, donating, sharing their work.
Engaging in discussions.
It all makes a difference.
It really does. Every little bit helps to create like a more diverse and independent media ecosystem.
And that's what we need.
Yeah. It's about empowering those who are speaking truth to power.
It's about creating a better future,
A more informed society.
a more engaged society.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up.
Yeah, I agree.
This whole Politico thing, it's been a real wake-up call.
Yeah. It's a reminder that we have the power to shape the future of news.
And that future is independent.
It really is. So, to everyone listening, keep asking those questions, keep digging deeper.
And keep supporting those who are fighting for a more transparent and accountable world.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
And until next time, keep on diving.